So, joining me today is Mr. Jayant Krishna. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he's joining me to have a discussion on the economic cooperation between India and Russia. Well, Jayant Krishna, first of all, we all know that the relationship both the countries share, it's rock solid. We have seen it's very reliable, it's very steady amid all sorts of global situations, all sorts of pressure from Western side. But when we talk about the economic ties between both the countries, we see that there is a huge amount of trade deficit and it is skewed in Russia's favor. If we want to work towards improving that, what all areas can Russia scout for and India can look to export in the Russian markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at, both these countries and their GDP rank by purchasing power parity, right? We are already the third largest economy by purchasing power parity. Otherwise, we are the fourth largest, right? And Russia is fourth largest by purchasing power parity, right? So these are two great economies, big-sized economies, and Russia's geographical expanse is so huge, right? But the fact is that on the export front, I mean the export of Indian products to Russia, on that front we have had a miserable performance since last several years. It's not a new development at all. I mean, just to tell you that the trade deficit in favor of Russia and against India, which used to be about $3.4 billion in the year 2020, has galloped to as much as $63 billion last year, that full year that we have the data of 2024. So I think this is something we need to look at more deeper. We all know India imports lots of products from Russia, beyond the military equipment and so on and so forth. We are one of the largest importers of crude oil from Russia, right? I mean, of course, there's been sanctions on those two companies by the US. So I think in these discussions we would know whether the crude oil import from Russia that India does will remain at the old level or will it go down. I think that's something which needs to be looked at. Other than that, I think India imports fertilizers, edible oils, these kind of things from Russia. Whereas if you look at what we export, India exports to Russia, I mean, there's not a single product category which has a critical mass, right? It's a very, very small stuff, right? And what I understand, bulk of the issues which are open, which are not tariff issues, unlike the US, where India is facing, 50% tariff on most of the products, except the exempted ones, But with Russia, the tariff barriers are not significant, not very huge, but non-tariff barriers in terms of, allowing some of the Indian products to be exported to Russia, their standards, stipulations, and many other regulations. I think that need to be ironed out. And India has to throw open, Russia has to throw open and give greater market access, for products from India to be exported to Russia. Categories, since you talked about. To my mind, the categories which are very, very important, are textile and garments. If India is exporting to the rest of the world, why not to Russia as well? Other category, India has emerged as a significant exporter of farm products, right? And Russia has, its population is about 14 crore. I think that's another. There are lots of mouths to be fed there as well, and I think that's one area where we need to get market access. Shrimps and other marine products in the fishery category, I think that's another area where India can start exporting, because Russia is a huge shrimp consuming country. Pharmaceuticals, even US kept pharmaceutical outside the 50% tariff barrier, because it is very, very critical for US to export pharmaceuticals from India, and there is no reason why India shouldn't export pharmaceuticals to Russia as well. So I think these four categories are very important to my mind, and slightly moving away from trade. I think one area which is very, very important is Russia is an aging economy, right? I mean, the median age of Indian workforce is about 29 years, and in Russia it is very, very significantly higher than that, kind of a thing. And also Russia faces huge amount of skill deficit. The data that I have been hearing in the last couple of days since President Putin's visit, took shape. Russia has needs almost 500,000, which is a huge set of number of people, almost 5 lakh people. They want to go and work there. So I think in this discussion that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Putin will have, I think they should talk about immigration issues, and so on and so forth. It will help both the countries.
You mentioned that the trade deficit which is there between both the countries, it is not related to tariffs. So what all regulatory restrictions are these countries facing? So, is it because of the sanctions, or is it something which is post 2022, or has it always remained like this?
I think the single biggest contributor has been, the sanctions which were imposed by the US and some other European countries when Russia invaded Ukraine in the year 2022, right? So we have to operate within the framework of those sanctions and look at, do they hurt us when it comes to exporting Indian products to their country, to Russia or not? And also Russia has some category restrictions also, from what I understand, like certain product categories can't be exported, or they have to go through a lot of due diligence and standards have to be met and so on and so forth. So I think, these kind of barriers need to be looked at. And, if India could export many of such products to the rest of the world, why not to Russia itself? But India will have to face competition because China over the years has flooded Russian market with lots of its products, right?
Yeah.
So India will have to, it's not just a market access issue. We need to be competitive also vis-a-vis Chinese products which are already available in Russia in abundance, So I think that's fair because export market is all competition driven, and,
Yes.
and I'm sure India will find its own space, its own areas of advantage, where I think these exports to Russia should be feasible to my mind.
There's also a difference between the foreign direct investment between both the countries. We see a lot of Indian companies investing in Russia, but it's not happening the other way. What can we do to increase that?
So I think for some reason Russian businesses have not looked at India as a major source of as a major country where FDI can come in, right? One reason could have been one of the Russian companies, when their 2G license was cancelled in India, after they had made some investments and so on and so forth. So I think they may have some bitterness, but that's a long old story, right? Kind of a thing. I think Russia has to look at India's ease of doing business has improved. Our rank, which used to be 120th, had jumped to 63. And now last couple of years, this ranking has not happened. I'm sure it would have jumped further. I think this is very important. Another thing, where India as a country needs to look at, and not just with Russia, with the US, European Union, and so on and so forth as well, that we have to ensure that there's a regulatory certainty, right? You can't have a certain set of policies and regulations in place when somebody decides to make an investment and change it mid-course. I think that hurts the sentiments of overseas investors quite a lot. And when these things are there, and I think there are lots of areas where Russian businesses could invest in India, and I see this. I think the problem is our ties since historic times have largely been focused on defense, right? I think and last few years since Russia agreed to supply crude oil to India at a price much lower than the other countries, oil exporting countries, I think that area has gone to that as well, right? So it has. Yeah. I think India has never really explored and showed that hunger to get Russian investments, which I'm sure would start now, and even some of the defense products, like S400 upgrades, which are
Yeah.
S500. Not just importing them, but co-producing, co-manufacturing
Yes.
them with Russia in India. I think that's very important. Even Sukhoi fifth generation aircraft, those could be manufactured in India. I think small and modular nuclear reactors. I think nuclear submarine. There are lots of areas where India could explore that, rather than just importing from there. Could FDI come here and we co-manufacture that in the country itself, under Make in India initiative and even otherwise, I think that's very important.
So you mentioned oil. We have already seen that there has been a significant dip, and we might see another dip happening in the month of December. Long term, how do you see this trajectory going? Will we see some sort of uptick in this, or will it continue to decline?
I think it's anybody's guess. If you look at with the sanctions imposed by the US against the two Russian oil companies from which we used to, import crude oil. I think initially the public sector companies, oil companies in India, they went slow on importing. But if you look at the November data, November data was, we imported more crude oil from Russia than what was there a month ago. But some dip is expected down the line, unless, when the Prime Minister Modi and President Putin discuss, they figure out modalities and some arrangements through which, is there any way to circumvent these sanctions and oil, import it at any other price? Because let me tell you, it makes a lot of business sense for India to import oil from Russia, given the rates that we get, and it helps India in not only in the balance of payment matters, but also in making available cheaper oil to Indian individuals as well as businesses. I think so. I think it's anybody's guess what happens. I'm sure during these 1.5 days talks in Delhi, there'll be discussions on how to keep importing, without major violations, taking cognizance of these sanctions, but yet some workarounds could be found to keep importing, because, as I said, the prices we get from Russia for crude oil are much lower than other oil exporting countries.
We know that a lot of deals, a lot of transactions are also done in rupee-ruble. How reliable this mechanism can be, because I read reports where a lot of multinational banks of Indian origins, they refuse Russian payment because of the sanctions, potential sanctions they could face in other countries. 90% of the deals right now are happening in rupee and ruble payments. What do you think will be the future of this? We have already seen discussions happening that BRICS can be an alternative. Do you see anything immediate happening, though Putin has already ruled out that we cannot see anything immediately happening? But what are your thoughts?
See, this is a contentious issue. I mean, if you look at BRICS, at the BRICS forum, there have been discussions on de-dollarization and so on and so forth, and how do we create so I think it's not that easy kind of a thing. Yes, there are issues about stability of the Russian currency and so on and so forth. One Indian business would like that all these things shift to dollars, and we do dollar trade between the two countries, right? But it remains to be seen, how these discussions go. And in near future, I don't see any major changes in the way currencies operate, in trade between these two countries. But a more stable arrangement would be to do it in dollars, to my mind.